a lot of tech companies are like still believe that they have these, like uniquely good position about themselves. But I think like time and time again, we're seeing that the reputation actually might be a bit more precarious. The moment that probably took most of my Twitter timeline last week was essentially just a scandal about an anonymous Reddit post. So the author, allegedly working for some big food delivery company, was shedding light on all the unethical practices that we're doing. And probably the most interesting was the idea of the desperation score. So they're looking at their couriers, and if the courier accepts too many cheap rides in the very beginning, they are only continuing to give them like very cheap orders in order to like push them down. And they're sharing a bunch of like other things. And a lot of people just ate it up and sort of like believed it. And like, I think we were just, maybe like minutes away from like news media publications, just like covering it as is without really questioning it. And even though they actually didn't name a specific company, but I mean, DoorDash is so synonymous with food delivery in the US, everybody just assumed it was them. And DoorDash had to react. So they basically went full on crisis mode and responded across all of their channels. I think people at Uber were really happy at that moment that they don't have to do so. But I think the response was quite interesting and unusual, and we can dissect this a little bit. So first of all, is like, yeah, they indeed ran across all the channels. So both on their founder Tony's account, on their corporate Twitter account, and on their blog as well. And what's really interesting is that I believe they really nailed the emotion there, because when you're talking to, like founders and executives and somebody is accusing them of something they find unfair or untrue, anger is the most reasonable emotion. I see this all the time. The problem is that in most of the cases, you can't really use it, because even if you're right, you would seem obnoxious or something like this. But here, because they combine it with just empathy to the couriers and generally the workers, I think this was one of the rare occurrences where you should have done this. And I mean, good for them. So they were basically angry at the very idea of issuing such statements, and they went and debunked each claim one by one, basically explaining, look, we don't do any of this. And I mean, it's always hard to confirm that you're not doing something that you're accused of. But thankfully, the story was written very poorly in the very beginning, so some Redditors were questioning it right away. But what happened then is Casey Newton actually went and contacted the author, who then submitted AI-generated evidence, like a fake Uber Eats badge. And I mean, there's no Uber Eats company, it's just they only have Uber badges. And he even created like an 18 pages like science paper, like the desperation score, mixing sort of like how science reports and like tech corporate documents look in one thing. And it was like really funny looking at this, but I mean, it looked extremely realistic. I mean, Nana Banana and just generally any Gen AI in general, they're really good. And I think the lesson that we extract from this is like, first, yeah, as I said, tech companies don't really have the reputation of like good guys anymore, because the real problem for DoorDash is that despite all the shortcomings of the original like post, a lot of people believed it, even though like the author was saying things like, oh, I'm writing this drunk from like a public library and like I'm anonymous by actually I sent in my notice 3 weeks ago, which really narrows down like how many people that could be. But that is a fact. Like, and I mean, DoorDash has done some really shady stuff in the past to their couriers and like users as well. So I think if there's anything positive to come out of it, one thing is that companies might have to think a bit more about their goodwill and reputation and essentially start behaving like any other companies or like operating out there. So that you actually need to do something in terms of like real tangible product and business decisions in order to earn this reputation first. And I think the second lesson is that, I mean, you're discussing like memes here, but I think what memes can be not just positive, they can also be extremely negative. And this was an example of something that could have become a negative meme, because like desperation score, like that just rolls off your tongue, really. If it lived for like a couple of more days, I think it would just become internal and people would, like recall this for like months and years. It would just stuck. It's like this meme about like AI data centers burning up water. Like I think I've read probably like a dozen of articles and, guides and web pages about how all of these calculations were really wrong. And even the author of the original book, Empire of AI, basically confirmed, yeah, it actually was like 3 orders of magnitude wrong. That doesn't matter. If the meme is out there, so like it's at Like, have you seen any like other examples of such negative memes?
Uh, well, sure. I mean, that's kind of a lot of what we talk about here, right? But it just reminds me of that what a lie will spread halfway around the world before the truth even puts its shoes on, right? I think the huge thing here was that people were like ready to believe that this was like a thing because they are so shady. I also did see that there was a couple of journalists that were asking like, hey, if this is real, like DoorDash, like employees come talk to us. I agree that DoorDash handled it really well because they like jumped on that super quick, knew that it was going to like catch fire, and really, came out and like talked about it. And what I like about what they did was that it wasn't just the company accounts, right? CEO Tony Zhu put it on his Twitter and like kind of broke down every like, so it was like coming from the top, showing that like he's involved, he knows what's happening, and he cares, about like the company. Let's talk about other companies that done it great, right? Because the astronomer viral moment last year at the Coldplay concert with like the CEO and the head of HR, they did the Gwyneth Paltrow commercial, which was also like bringing it back to like what the company does, and they used it as a moment of levity, because it's like super embarrassing, first off, this is like how people are finding out about your company for the first time, but then also using it as a way to, hey, introduce themselves to potentially, to potential new clients. But then we see, the flip side of that, right? We have with all the AI generated content conversations, right? Where McDonald's put out the AI generated ad and then had to quickly take it down because of the way that, people reacted to it. But the other one recently was CEO Bob Iger of, Disney announcing that they had a partnership with OpenAI on the same week that the McDonald's commercial came out. And it was like, you kind of got to be able to read the room a little bit. I always suggest, companies start thinking about, which is like what's happening culturally in the moment that may lead to backlash for your company, for the product, or whatever it is that you're doing, because it's really pulling away from like the messaging. I think a thing that DoorDash learned this week was that, yes, while people use it a lot, I mean, it is the default like food delivery service. People kind of hate the company. California just passed a law where DoorDash now has to refund every order that was long. And DoorDash was like pushing back. But then, you saw people in full force coming out and being like, why isn't this being passed in other states, right? Like, we all have stories of our order going wrong or our order not being delivered. I mean, there was that viral one that like, someone had posted an AI generated photo of their food being at their door, and turns out it wasn't there, right? And it's just so hard to get these problems fixed when you're like a consumer, that all these little things are dings to your brand that make it easy for people to believe the really horrible stuff that could be possible, even if it's not true.
And I think AI really enables the creation of this fake evidence at scale, because the way reporters usually verify this, that, like somebody actually wants to leak information from the company, is they basically check if these people have either access to some internal like dashboards or just some internal communications. Because the idea is like, look, if like it's unlikely that some people are going to just like recreate like fake email threads or like Slack screenshots or something like this. But the problem is that AI enables anybody to do this. And so like I'm almost positive like in 2026, we'll see a big scandal evolving out of like AI generated evidence that will actually get to like mainstream media publications first before it's debunked.
Yeah, we're starting to have to question whether it's real or not. Partner that with people wanting to believe these like narratives of the companies. I could definitely see it going like way, further than it did this time. Before like a journalist steps in, there's still room for that, for journalists to actually step in and be like the arbiters of truth, even within tech, where like they don't have the best reputation amongst with like companies.